Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with a preview of this Saturday's Awad and Athenia Stakes taking place at Belmont at the Big A. Before we get into this preview, just want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to the new NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Subscribing is completely free of cost, only just notifies you when new videos drop, and we have a lot of content, whether it is race previews like this one, full card analyses like Capping the Card, which we're doing this Saturday at Keeneland, or Breeders' Cup special videos. We have a lot of those. We have some top 5 contenders videos. We have some countdown to the Cup videos. We're going to have a whole lot more. We're going to dive into Del Mar track stats as it pertains to the Breeders' Cup. We're going to look at trainer by trainer success over the years at the Breeders' Cup, what we can learn and decipher from that data as it applies to 2024. So a lot of great stuff here on the channel. So make sure to press that subscribe button today. Now, like I said, we have 2 really fun turf route stakes races on Saturday. We have a 12 race card at Belmont at the Big A. And let me tell you something, it's going to kick off right away. Race 1, the horse Locked, last year's Breeders' Futurity winner, who was supposed to make his 2024 debut in the Fountain of Youth, and who many thought might be one of Todd Pletcher's 1 or 2 best Kentucky Derby horses in connection to fierceness. He ultimately had a bit of a complicated injury and was put to the bench, has not run since that Breeders' Cup Juvenile where he finished 3rd last November at Santa Anita. Now coming back, he's going to debut in the first race at Belmont at the Big A on Saturday. He's also cross-entered in the Perryville Stakes at Keeneland, but Todd Pletcher has come out and said he is not running there. He is running up here instead. And so that's going to be a great way to kick things off right away in race 1. But let's talk about the 2 stakes races. The Awad is the Awad is a mile and a 16th for 2-year-olds on the turf. This is race 3. So this is still part of that early pick 5 sequence. And it's an 8-horse field. I think it's a really interesting field. You have a couple of Chad Brown runners in this race, both Valuation Metric and Aviator Guy. What's so fascinating about those 2 horses is that they're both trying to do something for the first time and doing it in a big spot. So Valuation Metric is trying to win for the first time. This is a horse that has run 2 career races and is 0 for 2, has yet to win, but is your morning line favorite. So is still a maiden searching for that first win and is going to try to do it against a stakes field. Now, both efforts were impressive. Debuted on August 17th up at Saratoga over a good turf course. And if you remember that race, there was a big kind of a rabbit in that race that kind of opened up a bunch of lengths on the field early. And ultimately, though, Valuation Metric was a little wide. That race was pretty far back, made a big run late, but ultimately couldn't do any better than 4th. Actually got beat by Concord Green, who's in this race as well, the number 1 horse for Shug McGahee, who we'll talk about in a second. But then came back next time out down here at Belmont at the Big A, and with Manny Franco aboard this time, ran a much better race in terms of going straight to the lead, showed very good early speed, and really dueled with the horse Barricade down the stretch, ultimately lost that duel and was able to set some really slow fractions going a mile and a 16th. I mean, when they went 50-2 to the half, 114-4 to the 3/4. So they were going pretty slow coming home. Now they also finished a lot faster than they did in that debut race. So it's interesting to see, but still earned a 71 buyer, which I think is the top buyer in the field from a standpoint of turf, the top turf buyer in the field. I should differentiate that. I'm sorry, the second highest turf buyer in the field. Concord Green got a 72 in debut. But that said, this is a horse that is still trying to do something for the first time, which is win. And we get Flavien Prat back aboard, which I think is notable that Prat rode this horse in debut. Franco rode this horse last time out. Now Prat is back up on this horse. And I think that's interesting because Manny Franco and Flavien Prat are kind of trading places, because Aviator Guy, same sort of thing. Prat rode this horse in debut. Franco takes the horse last time out. Franco stays aboard now on Aviator Guy. So if you just look at, presumably Chad gave Flavien the option, which of these 2 horses do you want to run? Flavien chose to ride Valuation Metric. That might say something about his opinion of that horse and where he thinks he's more likely to win. Manny, of course, always one of Chad's top guys here, especially as we get further into the fall and into the winter. Over the winter, he usually is Chad Brown's #1 jockey up here. So going to be interesting to see from valuation metric. I'm a little against this horse. I don't like betting maidens in these types of spots. Brown over the last 5 years, 1 for 11 with 2-year-old maidens running in stakes races. So I think that there's, maybe not always the most winning move you can have for a trainer that does do this sometimes. So just something to keep in mind. And I think is, like I said, just a horse that looks very, very good, but I don't know what this horse wants to do yet necessarily in terms of what is the actual trip this horse wants to sit. Is this horse a deep closer the way it showed in debut? Does this horse want to go to the front? Obviously showed a lot better speed. There's not loads of speed in this race, though I would expect a horse like the #8 Flaming Proposition to go out and be a little bit forward. I would expect the #3 McDiesel to probably also be a little bit forward, but there's not loads of speed necessarily in this race. So it'll be interesting to see the trip that Manny Franco carves out for valuation metric here. Again, I don't know what this horse likes to do in terms of, does this horse want to go to the lead? Does this horse want to close from the back? Does this horse want to set a mid-pack trip? Maybe something it hasn't quite done yet. So that's just always a question mark. And the other question mark that I have, and listen, this is not Chad Brown knows his turf horses better than anybody else up here on the New York circuit. And this was a horse that was a $185,000 purchase, at the Keeneland September sales last year. So this was clearly a pretty sought after horse at one point. Like I said, Pratt is up on the ride. I've never loved Munning's babies going long on the turf. That's just not been, A, he doesn't really do a lot of that, and B, only winning at about a 10% clip with, a little over 1,300 starters in his career. Now, underneath, you have a lot of, you have a lot more turf pedigree, obviously, underneath. But even the dam, Sonoma Doro, is only 1 for 10 producing turf route winners. So again, I as a favorite, I'm going to try to play against this one. Now, you go to a horse like Aviator Guy. This horse is trying to do something for the first time as well, trying to run on the turf for the first time. This horse debuted on the dirt and did so, if you remember, in the race Sandman. That was the Sandman Saratoga race. And that horse was very good in the debut. Innovator, nice horse, also ran second in that race. Aviator Guy was third. Chad ultimately moves this horse to the turf, or tries to move this horse to the turf, I should say, next time out down here at Aqueduct. Race gets taken off the turf, run at a mile over the main track. Horse wins the horse wins that day, and does so by coming from off the pace. Strong late kick, was the even money favorite. Now, from a pedigree standpoint, there's absolutely nothing that would indicate that this horse wants any part of the turf. The dam is the half to gun runner. So, and your Uncle Mo up top. Now, Uncle Mo's about as versatile as you could possibly ask for in terms of, what can he do? And he's always produced solid turf routers. That's never been an issue. But still, there's not a lot of pedigree to suggest this is a turf horse. That said, Chad Brown's been very intentional about wanting to get this horse onto the turf, last time out. Now going back to the turf in an even bigger spot, obviously, after winning the maiden race, now going and running a stakes race on the turf for the first time. Brown is not great with some of these numbers. Interestingly enough, for a high percentage trainer, if you look at the surface dynamics here, if you look at kind of first time turf and dirt to turf over the last 5 years, Brown is hitting at an 18% rate, which is not bad at all. You start looking at when he does this with 2-year-olds, drops down to a 13% rate. So again, not overwhelming. Okay, this is a guy who's a 24, 25% trainer otherwise. So when you see a number like 13%, it means it's not having a ton of success necessarily in the barn. Again, this is a very intentional decision on his part. And you look at what he does with that in stakes races, only 2 as a sample size, 0 for 2. Voter registration was a first-time starter, and Eminent Victor finished third up at Woodbine, and then Talma trying turf for the first time. So it's not a common move to see, but it's something just to mention And like I said, in general, when he's switching his 2-year-olds from turf to dirt and from dirt to turf and trying turf for the first time, again, not as much success as you see with some of his other angles that he does have. Now, I think that's noteworthy. And it's also noteworthy, like I said, Franco stays on this one, and Pratt goes to valuation metric. A horse that I'm really interested in is the number 5, Tiz Dashing. This is my top selection. If you go to NYRA Bets, you can read my analysis on this race. And ultimately, I landed on Tiz Dashing. Why? I like these Tiz the Laws on turf. I like them quite a bit. And I think this is one that's got plenty of turf pedigree underneath. And I just think this one has some ability when you start talking about going 2 turns and stretching out. One in debut going 6 furlongs down here at Aqueduct and had Johnny Velasquez aboard. Velasquez stays aboard for trainer Barkley tag. Notably, that is Tag's only win for the meet at this point. 1 for 12. Only horse to even hit the board for him at this point. I sometimes like horses like that who are the statistical anomalies for a trainer. There was a horse that still is running, a horse like Red Carpet Ready for Rusty Arnold. And this horse, Arnold, had terrible numbers second or first off the layoff. And I remember Red Carpet Ready won first off the layoff. Vicky Oliver's had some horses like this where she's like 2% over 5 years, second back from a long layoff. And she's got a couple of horses that won in those spots. And I always like to kind of track those horses and I always call them kind of stats busters, horses that they don't care about what your DRF formulator stats say. They're just going to run. But it's interesting when you look at a trainer that's not known for something or has not had a lot of success doing something, and then there's a horse that then does that thing successfully. To me, that's always a little bit of a plus. Now, maybe that's an oversimplification of handicapping, but it's just something I sometimes think about in this spot. The other part of this is the Tiz the Law. And it's interesting. This is obviously Tiz the Law's first crop, and he has shown a real proclivity for producing really good turf runners. He's had 29 turf runners, or 29 horses, 29 starters, I should say. 10 wins out of 29 starts between the sprint and routing. That is incredibly impressive. That's a 34% clip. And if you remember, his dam was Tiz Fizz, who was a multiple-time turf route stakes winner. So it makes sense that he's producing good turf horses because there is turf pedigree there on Tiz the Law, even though obviously Constitution up top and was a great dirt horse winning the Belmont and the Travers. But like I said, really producing some nice turf horses here and has shown the ability to get the distance in that regard. And even on the dirt, as these horses have stretched out, they've gotten better. So I actually like this horse stretching out from 6 furlongs to 1.1 miles now. I like the pedigree. I like that Barkley's been giving this horse just a bunch of maintenance work since that race. Johnny Velasquez stays aboard. This horse should be sitting kind of a mid-pack trip, I would imagine. Has good early speed, but not elite early speed. And then, again, stretching out, should be able to sit, I don't know, 3rd or 4th in this race, I'm thinking, and then make a little bit of a move at the top of the stretch. I just think this one, if you're looking at those top 3, this is the one I think is going to give you maybe the best value because I think the 2 Chad Brown horses are really going to get bet down. And you have a horse like Concord Green on the inside, 9-2 for Shug McGahee. I always love a good Shug horse on the turf, no doubt about that. But I do worry about this one a little bit. This horse got the perfect pace set up in debut, ended up winning that race over a nice horse, Davy Crockett, actually, who I like a lot. That was up at Saratoga in that race featuring valuation metric, but then came back in the Pilgrim and just didn't run a lick. And that was the race Zulu Kingdom just nosed out Noble Confessor. And what's interesting about that race was it was 1 mile and a 16th, so it was 2 turns, and he won in debut going 2 turns, but that was over a yielding turf course. You might be able to forgive that effort. Obviously, the pedigree's all there. I mean, sire by Warfront out of a dam from Arch. I mean, there's plenty of pedigree here. Dylan Davis has remained hot. He had a huge day Thursday. I think 4, maybe 5 winners on the day Thursday up here at Aqueduct. So he's having a huge meet as well. He's winning at a 21% clip, maybe go up to 22 or 23 after today's races. So this one just needs to get back to that debut effort because, again, it has the top turf buyer in the field, 72, and needs to really run back to that in order to have a shot, I think. Here, we'll be able to save all the ground. we'll get firm ground on Saturday. We have great weather up here this fall, so knock on wood, everything's been beautiful, though absolutely no rain in the forecast at all. So it's going to be a firm turf course. Should get back to that liking. The difference is what sort of pace are you going to get? As I mentioned, there's not a lot of speed in this race, and so you might get one of those 50 seconds to the half type of races. As a juxtaposition in debut, they went 48-3 in the opening half up at Saratoga when this horse won and came from off the pace. Are you going to get 48-3 again? Probably not. So I do think that's something to keep in mind. This is over the outer turf course. I will say the outer turf course has been playing very, very similar to the inner turf course. You saw a couple of gate to wire winners that first week down here, but really since then, it's been playing very, very similar to the inner. Closers have been doing well in the outer turf course as well as on the inner. So I don't think there's a huge difference there between the outer and the inner in terms of when you have to make your move or the type of horses that can or cannot win. Listen, those are your top four choices. It's hard to get past those four from a standpoint of your top selection. And that's why I've landed on Tiz Dashing as my top choice. It's just to give you a little bit of value, at least trying to get past Valuation Metric and Aviator guy. I do think a horse like McDiesel at 10-1 is a little interesting. This is a horse that ran pretty well in debut at on the turf, I should say, down here at Aqueduct before we went up to Saratoga, then went to the dirt, broke its maiden on the dirt, and then ran in a couple of state-bred stakes races sprinting on the dirt. Now is stretching back out on the turf, has had some nice works for Rudy Rodriguez. Rudy's not necessarily known for winning a lot of these open company turf races, but I 10-1, could I see McDiesel getting out there on the front end, getting comfortable maybe, and holding on for a piece? Yeah, I could absolutely see that. So I do think you could maybe find some value underneath in this particular race. Well, let's go to the Athenia Stakes, which is the other stakes race on the card. And this one is going 1 1/8 for 3-year-old nut fillies and mares. And this one is another kind of intriguing field. And it's an 8-horse field. There's a couple of main track only entries in terms of Amanda's Folly, Movie Moxie, and Evidencias. But ultimately, it's going to be an 8-horse field. Your morning line favorite in this race is the number 6 prerequisite. Now, what makes this horse so interesting is this horse is coming back from a substantial layoff, had a 13-month layoff after running the Lake Placid last year at Saratoga, then comes back just last month, 13-month layoff, and wins against $62,000 optional claiming company, and did it so gate to wire. Really showed a lot of good speed, always had good speed. Won the Wonder again last year, grade 2, going gate to wire. But it's not a one-trick pony. Broker Maiden sitting off the pace and then moving. Flavian Pratt remains aboard with this one, is switching off Lasix, which he got last time. But the fact that Chad is moving this horse up into stakes competition right away off of that very impressive victory off the bench probably tells you everything you need to know. I think this one looks very, very tough in this spot. No two ways about it. And 85 buyer speed figure in return, which is the tied for a career best effort. There's a horse that's great, grade 1 placed, grade 2 winner. So you have to respect the form as a 3-year-old, and certainly should be able to take another step forward from that 85 buyer speed figure that you had coming off the really long layoff. That said, if I'm going to try to beat the horse, I'll try to beat the horse with the Grand Motion runner, 3 Priests. And this one's coming out of, I think, a pretty tough race down at Kentucky Downs. Used to be part of Roger Varian's barn overseas. That race at Kentucky Downs was the first start in North America. Joel Rosario now up. Now, this horse is cross-entered for a stakes race on Sunday at Keeneland. So that is something to keep in mind, where Graham ultimately ends up wanting to run this horse. But this is the daughter of the great Japanese sire Deep Impact. And obviously have the connection to Sunday Silence. Underneath, you have a Dam Out of Giants Causeway. Going long on the turf is what this horse should absolutely want to do. And I thought it ran a really good race in the ladies marathon, which is grade 3 down at Kentucky Downs. Finished behind 2 very nice horses, Nisi Marie and Vergara. Those two are, have combined for 6 stakes victories between the two of them. So finishing third in a field of 9 behind the two of them, I don't think is anything that is disrespectful. I actually like the cutback here. This horse has been marathoning most of her career, going 1.5 miles, 1.25 miles, 1.25 miles last time out. Now going 1.125 miles. shortening up a little bit. I actually think that might not be the worst of all ideas. I'm not saying you're going to get more or less pace up here in New York based upon that, but I just think maybe going a little shorter is not a bad idea. This horse kind of made a little bit of a move, got up into contention, and then just kind of faded back a little bit late last time. So like I said, I think the cutback will be beneficial for Three Priests. I think this one looks pretty good. 7-2, you're getting maybe slightly better odds on this one. If you're looking for a bomb or a little bit more of a long shot, I do think the number 3 Edict is really interesting for David Donk. This horse admittedly has not run since last December, making first start in North America, having run exclusively in Argentina. However, the horse is a 2-time Grade 1 winner down there, going 1.25 miles on the turf. The horse can handle firm turf or soft turf. And like I said, 2-time Grade 1 winner and another time finishing second in a Grade 1. So this one has a lot of ability. Donk has had this horse up here for a little while, training. Johnny Velasquez hops aboard, 12-1. And this is just an X Factor horse. Could the horse finish last? Absolutely. But at 12-1, I don't know. This is a little bit of an interesting horse. I think that this is a horse maybe worth throwing into a horizontal wager, depending on how skinny or spreading you're getting in some of these races. I think this horse, may have some upside potential. So I just think there's worse ideas than going with like a horse like the number 3 Edict. I find pretty interesting in this race. Will certainly be interesting to see how some of these Argentinian runners do. What I'll say is we've seen a lot of good Argentinian runners in recent years. Now, a lot of them are for Ignacio Correas IV. We saw, obviously, Didia. We've seen Mustafa, who looked so good winning the Vosburg, is going to be in either the dirt mile or the sprint out at at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup. And then you just had a horse win today down at Keeneland. On Thursday, I should say, down at Keeneland, who was a first-time North American starter coming in for Argentina. So these Argentinian horses are legitimate, and they really are nice runners. And I think, again, the bigger question for me is just coming off that long of a layoff. Hasn't run since last December. Now we're coming back from a 10-month layoff. Admittedly, a lot of these horses do their running down kind of opposite times of the year from us. So this is maybe not all that unusual to have those types of long breaks. But again, just something to consider. Like I said, 12-1, definitely worth thinking about. The other horse that I think is a little interesting is the other Chad. Go figure, right? And that's Child of the Moon, 5-1 in the morning line. And this one is third start now in North America. Had been running over in France. And I thought ran a winning race ultimately in debut. And that was coming off a 13-month layoff of her own. And just finished second by a neck, comes back, first level allowance company, and wins that race next time out. Looks a lot better doing it. Now, this horse is a deep closer. That is a concern because, again, where's the speed going to come from? Prerequisite's going to have speed for sure. 30 Thou Kelvin's probably going to have a little bit of speed from the far outside. That's a horse that likes to show early turn of foot. Horse like Spirit and Glory for Robert Falcone. That's a horse that likes to go to the front in a lot of instances and has done so lately. So I think if you're going to play against Prerequisite, the argument might be, well, hey, 30 Thou Kelvin's going to send, and a horse like Spirit and Glory is going to send. Now, admittedly, Prerequisite has tracked before and won, but the horse might not be able to get the lead that it wants. It might have to go a little bit faster than she wants. So something to consider. Maybe it opens up for a horse like Papilio for Mark Casse, who's a deep closer, though I think that horse sometimes finds its own trouble. And certainly could set up for a horse like a deep closer like Child of the Moon that has Manny Franco aboard. I do think it's notable. Again, Pratt had ridden Child of the Moon first 2 starts in North America, chooses to remain on Prerequisite. Child of the Moon goes to Franco as a result. So you don't even really have to read between the lines. Pretty obvious which of these two Pratt prefers. Like I said, Three Priests, I think, is an interesting alternative in this spot. Edict is an interesting long shot to consider. Tufani for Michael Stidham, I'm not 100% sold on that horse. Won a restricted stakes race at Colonial, 2 back, and won a state bred handicap down at Colonial as well after that. This is going to be a little bit more of a test, though, and I'm not entirely sure I like this horse in this spot. Is a winner against Open Stakes Company, winning the Pago Hop down at Fairgrounds, going a mile. Is going to go 1.1 miles for the only the second time. The only other time the horse did it finished a distant 6th in the Virginia Oaks. So something to consider there as we look through this field. But like I said, prerequisites going to be a tough horse to get by. I'll try to use 3 Priests to beat that horse. I think Edict's an interesting long shot, and Child of the Moon, the other Chad, you always got to take seriously. All right. Well, listen, that's going to do it for the preview of the Awad and the Athenia Stakes today. Hope you play all the great races that we have up here on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. But listen, we also have a lot of great content for you at Keeneland, capping the card Keeneland for Saturday, 10 races, 2 graded stakes races. I got Tom Leach, Mr. Keeneland himself, Mr. Kentucky himself, joining me on the channel as well. We did a preview of the Perryville and the Raven Run, so make sure to check that out. That's already there. We got Breeders' Cup videos. Make sure to check all of those out. A lot of fun stuff. Top 5 list. Who doesn't love a top 5 list? So give me your thoughts on your top 5, and should be a lot of fun. So make sure to press that like button and subscribe today. Listen, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, it's now post time.